evening and welcome to the second Diabetes Forum of ICC Crack the Wellness Code. I'm Somnath Chatterjee, co-founder and ecosystem lead. Welcome to all of you to the second edition of the Diabetes Forum that we present today, where we're going to hear some amazing recovery stories from health heroes and also invite you for the support group that we're going to launch very shortly. We have an amazing panel of speakers. Dr. Malathi Srinivasan, who's going to moderate the session. You can see her on the screen. And this session is also a celebration of our partnership with Stanford Care. We've done three sessions earlier with Stanford Care, the fourth one. So welcome to you, Dr. Malathi. Finally, without much ado, over to you, Dr. Malathi Srinivasan, to moderate and also, give us the perspective, on just diabetes, preventive care, lifestyle, diet, and of course, tons of wellness best practices that you've been researching at Stanford, and of course, your perspective on health heroes. I mean, this is a very unique concept that we have in CWC, and we would like to hear what is your perception and how we can do better and how can really help the community through Health Hero and of course support groups. So over to you, Dr. Malathi.
So Som and ICC and Crack the Wellness Code, first I want to thank you and the entire ICC community for having all of us here today. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be able to share some thoughts with you. I've been doing work in diabetes for over 20 years as a clinician, of course, but also more recently researching the differential health risks of South Asians and Indians in lots of different areas, from cardiology to diabetes to other things, as part of Stanford Care. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Stanford Care, although I'd love to do that with you. But I want to kind of spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about diabetes. So I'll just say one brief word about CARE. So CARE is a Stanford Center for Asian Health Research and Education, and it was founded about 3 years ago to help improve the research around Asian healthcare. You probably don't know this, but although Indians make up or Asians in total make up about 6% of the US population, and about a third of the people in the Bay Area, less than 1% of all NIH research goes towards Asian health. And what this means is that the decisions that are being made about Asian healthcare are being made on data obtained predominantly from non-Hispanic white men, sometimes women, or other racial and ethnic groups. And so only now we're starting to really focus in the past 10 years or maybe even 15 years on the differential health risks of Asians. And South Asians, we have a very high risk of diabetes and heart disease. And I'd like to go over a little bit of the reason why. Our health heroes are going to talk a lot about sort of prevention. And so I'm going to hit a few things there. But really, I wanted to talk to you about why you should care about this. Okay. So the first thing, I guess, is, what is diabetes? And it's a condition where your blood sugar is too high, and blood sugar is the main source of energy for your body. There's only 4 sources of energy for us. We've got carbohydrates, which are either complex or simple sugars, proteins, fats, and alcohols. And those are the only 4 sources. And we need at least the first 3 sources in differential amounts for different functions that we have. And it's very tightly regulated. Our blood sugar is very tightly regulated by insulin, which is a hormone made by the pancreas. And also it's part of a complex metabolic phenomenon where our blood fats, our blood sugars, all of our integrative functions of living are tightly regulated by our brain, our thyroid, and a lot of the other organs in our body that are part of our endocrine system, our hormone system. So people talk about different types of diabetes. The first one is type 1, which is where the pancreas doesn't work, but more commonly is type 2, which is really a lifestyle problem where we have a metabolic issue where the body doesn't handle excess carbohydrates very well or excess fats very well. Okay, there's also a few more types, but when we're talking about diabetes and reversal of diabetes today, we're talking about type 2 diabetes. So I want to be clear, we're not talking about the type that's due to pancreatic failure, okay? And I won't go into the details. There's a lot more things that we could talk about. But here are some of the important things for diabetes in South Asians. In general, diabetes in South Asians probably develops about 5 or 10 years earlier. It's diagnosed usually 3 to 5 years earlier. We've got 2 times the risk of diabetes than other ethnic groups. It develops at a lower body mass index. And in fact, if you're familiar with this concept of body mass index, it's really it's a proportion of sort of your height and weight. Asians develop diabetes about 1.5 units less than other people. So if a normal body mass index, which is height in meters squared over kilograms, is developed, say, at say you're considered overweight at a BMI of 25. For Asians, it's 23.5, so everything's dropped at 1.5 lower. It's also often detected at lower stages because many of the people in the South Asian community don't seek regular healthcare. We have different levels of pancreatic insulin function and detection and metabolism than the Europeans do, and we often have worse outcomes and complications. So when I say this, what are these outcomes and complications? And you've probably thought about things like stroke and heart disease and heart failure, which are very commonly thought of. So they've got 4 times the risk of heart disease, which is very important. And I put this slide up here just to remind us that diabetes is actually the leading cause of blindness in the United States, and it's preventable. Okay, so what we don't think about is the effect on the rest of our body and all the nerves. So having high blood sugar tags all of our nerves, it tags our blood vessels, and it causes abnormal growth of blood vessels. And it also causes a lot of problems with our nerve function where we lose pain sensation, muscles start to contract, and we have a motor neuropathy, which can progress to diabetic foot ulcers. And I apologize for the next couple slides since they are right around dinner time. But also you can have amputations, and people can become very debilitated. And the type of things, the risk factors for a diabetic foot ulcer are kind of many of the things that you would think about with loss of motor neural function and peripheral artery disease. And I just want to give you a sense of why you should care about this. And here are some numbers that you should remember as part of the community. That hemoglobin A1C, which is a 3-month look at your blood sugar, is considered normal at about 5 or even less than that. You're pre-diabetic at 5.7 to 6, and you're considered diabetic at 6.5 or more. This is a 3-month look at the average percentage of hemoglobin, which is a blood protein that is stuck with a lot of glucose. Okay, so it's a 3-month look because your usually your red blood cells last for about 3 months in the body before they're recirculated and metabolized. And so these are just some general numbers. And you might have heard of a fasting blood sugar. So it's normal when it's like 100 or less, and it's pre-diabetic when it's 100 to 125. And this is in the morning when you get up without eating anything. And then has a plasma, it's like you're diabetic at over 126. Okay. And so I'm going to really kind of go to this slide instead, which really shows that the Masala study, which has been ongoing now for a couple of years, showed that the incidence of type 2 diabetes in South Asians is about 23%, and it's higher than Caucasians, Chinese Americans, Latino, and Blacks, okay? And this is in the United States. And it's very serious. So it's really affecting almost a quarter of us. And both of my parents have diabetes. So this is a topic that hits very close to home. And this is kind of another way of looking at the relative risk of diabetes using people who are non-Hispanic white as a control group. Our risk is 2 to 3 times higher, as you can see, okay? So I'll kind of skip this one, but really and I'll send all these slides to everybody. But there's 2 different ways that we can really affect our development of diabetes. And the first one is through exercise and of building muscle and burning calories. And the second one is through diet. Okay, so diet and lifestyle are the two ways that we can modify all of these risks. And I know everyone always says, oh, eat healthier and exercise more. And that's very easy to say, but what do we mean by that? Okay, so Indians in general have a what's called relative sarcopenia, which means not a lot of muscle mass. And so for the same body weight, we would have a less muscle than at the same age than someone who is Hispanic or African American or Latin. Okay, and so this really leads to a problem because muscle burns fat or burns sugar independently without the need for insulin. So the more muscle you have, the lower your blood sugar is going to be overall. Okay, and even walking, doing any kind of whole body exercise is going to be helpful. And when people talk about diabetes, and an American doctor or someone who's not aware of what an Asian diet's like talks about an unhealthy American diet, they're thinking about pizza and burgers and chips and stuff. And the problem is that the unhealthy Indian diet is often our favorite snacks and our favorite foods. I mean, I love dosa. I love my my white rice, and I love my chapatis and my puris and all of my fried food. And I'm not a big sweet person, but gosh knows, most people love their jalebis and gulab jamun and all of these other things that are really, really not good from a diabetic standpoint because they either have a lot of free sugars or very simple sugars. And the simple sugars are easily broken down to glucose, which is what causes your blood sugar to spike. So the more complex the carbohydrate that you eat, the longer it takes to break down, the longer it takes to become a simple sugar. And you don't have the spike of the blood sugar as it's absorbed into your body, which causes a lot of insulin release, which then eventually leads to some insulin resistance. Okay, so which of these people has diabetes? This is a question. I'd like you to stare at all of these different people. Okay, these are all happy-looking South Asians, right? So which of these people has them? Here's a thing you can't tell. And this is important because you can't tell someone has early diabetes by looking at them, and you have to get tested. Okay, so one of the big questions people always ask is, what should we do to take care of ourselves, and what should we do to become healthy? And we'll give very culturally tailored. So at Stanford, we have a center for a Sati Center, which is for South Asian heart disease, with dietitians and physicians who are very familiar with the South Asian diet and how to modify it. But we have to ask questions like, when many of our traditional foods and lifestyle are contributing to something that's creating disability or death, what do we do to change? And this is a real question, right? And see if I can move forward on this. And what we know is that diet and lifestyle can reverse diabetes, and there's increasing evidence on this. There was a narrative review that came out just a couple of years ago looking at the highlights of what people can do to be able to reverse diabetes. And it's the standard things that you would think about. The first one is, adopting a more active lifestyle and moving as much as you can, doing weights, doing more walking. And then sort of going from being sedentary to more vigorous, more socialization. But when you socialize, to socialize in different ways, not just to go to someone's house and have a fabulous meal, but take a walk together or do something active together. The third thing, of course, are things that have to focus on foods that have more complex carbohydrates or have much less carbohydrates, intermittent fasting. So there's a lot of different types of things that we can do, but reaching out and forming a community, having a community group, people who can support you, all of those things make a huge difference. And because we often live in large embedded communities and multi-generational families, we can't just do it on our own. We have to do it as a community and do it as a family unit. Okay, so there's a lot of behavioral change models that you can think about that we can use, some things like the BJ Fogg model from Stanford, which looks at sort of the, behavior and motivation ability, and then, how hard is it to do, how easy is it to do, how is your motivation, how can you reduce the threshold for action, or stages of change, which is a very well-known model of, kind of getting ready to do something, doing it, maintaining it, preventing relapse, and then kind of going back to the point where you're just kind of thinking about it. So these are very standard models that people think about, but rather than think about behavioral change models, we're going to transition to something that I think is even more powerful, because I think that the data tells a very clear story. But what I want to talk about is role models. Okay, we have in our community people who have role modeled exactly how to do this, and they've done it all in their very unique way. And that uniqueness, that customizing to the individual, that customizing to your life and your lifestyle, that ability to dig within yourself, find the motivation, find the discipline, to be able to become an agent for change, not just for you, but for your family and then your community, is what we're here to celebrate today. And today we're going to celebrate three people, Amit Gupta, Naren Bakshi, and Raj Shah, all of whom are entrepreneurs in the Valley and have taken control of their own health. And I'm so proud to be a facilitator here to let them tell their stories today, because this is really is not about me talking, but it's really about us learning from them and their stories, because they've done it. They've taken that hard path to deciding to make a change in their life, and then making that change and sustaining it. How they've done it, what they've done, how you can learn from it, you sharing your stories about the changes you've made, what was easy, what was hard for you, what was easy, what was hard for them. That's what we're here to discuss for the rest of our time together. So I'll stop sharing at that point. I hope that gives you a little bit of context, but as a physician who's taken care of patients with diabetes, whose parents have diabetes, having seen the complications amongst our family, friends, and our family and community, I can tell you this is a devastating scourge that's preventable. And I'm hopeful that today, all of the people who are here together will have additional ideas on what as a community we can do to be able to bend the curve for diabetes.
So hi, my name is Amit Gupta, and I'll talk about my journey with diabetes as well as the lessons that I learned. So first, a little bit about myself. So I'm an engineer by training. I studied in the 90s, did a lot of engineering work also in the same decade. Then starting in early 1999, I switched over to entrepreneurship, founded a couple of companies. And for me, everything changed on this one day that's marked here, the 27th of July. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So when the day started, I was really feeling like I was on the top of the world. The company that I had co-founded, it had raised its Series C. We were executing well on our business plan. We were market leaders in our space, growing 100% year over year, planning our IPO. Things couldn't be better. Then I developed some chest pains on that day, so I decided to go to the ER. Well, the doctors did their test, and they told me, well, the good news is we don't see any issues with your heart. It's just fine. The bad news is that your blood sugar is really high. In fact, my blood glucose level was 296. And if you remember, Dr. Malti said, the fasting sugar should be under 100, and it should probably not go below above 140, 150 max. So I was like more than 2x over. And they asked me, do you know that you have diabetes? I did not know that. In terms of my A1C, as measured that day, was 10.8. And as Dr. Srinivasan said, anything above 6.5 is considered diabetic. So I was way over the limit. Well, it turns out that in the last few decades, while I was pursuing my career success, I'd kind of neglected my health. And this landed me in a deep hole. So I had to kind of step back, reprioritize my health. And with the few changes I made, I got my A1C back to the 6.3, 6.4 range. But then again, it started to climb up again. And in early 2019, it reached 7.4. It was at that time my doctor recommended that I start injecting insulin, and which was something I was a little bit afraid of and I didn't really want to do. So that really was my second wake-up call. So that is when I decided to get serious. So I talked to multiple medical practitioners, I read a lot, and started making lifestyle changes. And combined, these changes got me to an A1C of 5.5. And if you remember, 5 years before, I was at 10.8. It's almost a reduction by half A1C. So what are the main changes I made? So the number one was on my diet. I decided to do low carb. I decided to eat whole foods. And I also eliminated seed oils. And I also started doing intermittent fasting. And for the people that may not be aware of this, intermittent fasting is where you eat in a short time window every day. So in my case, I was doing what's called 18-6 intermittent fasting, which means I would eat in a 6-hour window, but not eat for 18 hours after that. So that is my diet plan. In terms of exercise, I was doing resistance training 2 to 3 hours every week. And then I was measuring everything. I measured my weight, I measured my resting heart rate, my glucose levels, my heart rate variability. I got a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, to measure my blood sugar. I download it religiously every single day to my computer, analyze it in different ways, figure out what was causing my blood sugar to go up, and then make changes. And it was this constant loop of measuring, analyzing, and acting that is responsible for my A1C drop down to where it dropped down. So now that was a journey, but now I want to take a few minutes to talk about the lessons I learned along the way. And I'm hopeful that some of these lessons will be useful for you as well. Okay. So the first thing I want to kind of emphasize is, and as Dr. Srinivasan also said, it takes a long time. So while for me, July 27th was the date I found out, turns out that my metabolism had been messed up for a while before. And in fact, what I did is I went back and got all of my medical records going back 2 decades. And back in 1997, when I looked at the records, they clearly indicated there's from a lipid panel, the markers for triglycerides and HDL, and their ratio is strongly indicated. And my ratio was very high, it was almost 6. And that's a very good indicator that I just completely missed. And unfortunately, the reality is that most regular PCPs are not as aware of this. So I strongly recommend going to physicians that specialize in healthcare for South Asians. As Dr. Srinivasan said, we are at dramatically higher risk for a variety of reasons. And we have some really good centers in the Bay Area, including at Stanford, at Sutter, as well as at the South Asian Heart Center. All of them have got really good people, and I would strongly recommend you go there. The other thing to also kind of remember is that a lot of times when you hear these stories, you hear the stories of the success, but what you don't see is it's not a straight line. So things improve, then you kind of go down a little bit, you take a step back, and then you come up again. The important thing is that you have to continue believing that the goal is worth achieving, the goal is worth fighting for, and even if there's some small setbacks, they can't derail your overall progress towards a goal. So don't get discouraged if from time to time the numbers start going the wrong direction. That's normal, just can come over it. The other thing also is there are many, many different opinions about what works. So there's the low carb community, there's the low fat community, there's plant-based, there's carnivore, there's keto, there's whole foods. The people advocating many small B's, the people advocating intermittent fasting. And my belief is that all of us are fairly different, and different things work for different people. And really all you need to do is to experiment, try out different things, see what works for you, and whatever works for you is what you should do. And ultimately the best plan is the plan that you can stick to. And for me personally, using the CGM was a complete game changer. As one data point, so you see this massive spike where my blood sugar went over 200. Turns out that that was the day I had some idlis. And unfortunately, I am one of the about 10% of the population which have this kind of high glucose reaction to rice. And I only learned that a lot later, but thanks to using a CGM, I figured out that that was the reaction that rice was causing for me. And from that point on, I decided not to eat any more rice. Now, this is the kind of stuff that worked for me. Similarly, by using a CGM, you can also find out what works for you and make the changes. Now, what I also did is I wrote a few articles about my own journey, along with the different tests I used to get better. And all this information is available online. I'm including the link here. You can also search for these terms. Happy to answer any questions you may have about this. And that's my story. Thank you.
Amit, I really wanted to congratulate you again on doing this. And I'm really impressed by your data-informed approach to diabetes. Can I ask you sort of, as you were thinking about the various things that you can do, how did you choose to use a continuous glucose monitor? What were the sort of pluses and minuses of that? That's the first question. And I'll ask you my second question after that.
Sure. It's a very good question. So at least from where I stand, it's also a question of your personality, the way you are and the way you approach things. So I'm an engineer. So I love numbers and I love playing with numbers. I just basically keep analyzing things forever. And so what happened is in my case, so the most important thing was it gave me near instantaneous feedback as to how my body was reacting to different stimulus. And so and something I didn't cover. So for example, if I didn't sleep well one night, I saw my morning sugars are up the next morning. That was a warning for me, okay, watch out for and make sure that you sleep properly. If I had a late night session, that also caused some disruptions. So I just basically was able to figure out using this, just trying out things one by one, but most importantly, by just looking at the numbers, figuring out what worked, what didn't work. And for me, there was no downside. I love it.
That's great. And, we have a question here from Nandini Garud, who had asked how you paid for this, because again, insurances usually don't pay for continuous glucose monitoring if you don't have diabetes and if the diabetes is not out of control. So once you were starting to get controlled, did you pay for this yourself, or did you run it through your insurance program?
Yeah, a good question. So insurance tends to be somewhat unpredictable. So I've had time when I've paid it myself. I've had times when insurance has covered it. And it's almost like throw a dice and it'll tell you whether the insurance is going to pay or not pay. From my perspective, I'm okay paying for it. Turns out it doesn't cost that much if you shop around. So, but yeah, I've had both happen. Sometimes insurance pays and sometimes it doesn't pay.
Okay, great. Thank you. We also had another question from, let's see, hold on one second. We had a question about diagnosing insulin, or diabetes, which I'll discuss later. But Amit, one more question for you before we move on, and I think I'm going to ask this of all the panelists, which is, there's times when we want to either have a cheat day or when we sort of fall off of our planned progress. How do you sort of recenter yourself and then just get back on the schedule again? Like, what goes through your head? How do you overcome your own personal barriers?
So I think a few different things. So number one is at some level, I knew that it was not an option for me to just kind of lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that this is something that I had to win, come whatever. So that's kind of the number one thing. And the number two thing is, at some level, the advice I got from a doctor was, look, you didn't develop it overnight. You didn't develop it because you basically had bad blood sugar for 1 day or 2 days. You developed it over multiple decades of really, really bad lifestyle choices. So even if you go off for a day or 2 days, it's not really going to cause major long-term damage. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Let's get back on track.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Amit. Som, should we transition to our next fabulous health hero?
Yes, we can have Naren Bakshi to.
First of all, I'm Naren Bakshi. I have been in United States long time ago, in 1966. I have this honor of reaching here when there were only 1,000 Indians in the Bay Area. There was no Silicon Valley. So it was a great opportunity for me to be here. Did a lot of work in industry and IT. But then what happens in our industry is the ultimate thing is that you find wealth somewhere. How do you find wealth? You find a place. And the ultimate thing in entrepreneurship is you become a founder of a company and then reach a point where this goes public. That's the ultimate thing that can ever happen. So this chart shows today there's trillions of dollars in entrepreneurship, but in health. We're spending so much money in health, and yet our population is not doing well. It is worse. I must really feel bad that Silicon Valley, especially, has done exceedingly well as far as Indians are concerned. We can be very proud of the fact that most of the people have done well personally. Their children have done well, and in my case, their grandchildren are doing well. Many dimensions when it comes to wealth, yes. Education, yes. Many different directions, whatever you look at, inventions, patents, every which way, our community has done well. Some are doctors, some are entrepreneurs, some of them are hotel motel people, but every way. As Dr. Malti said, it's very unfortunate that if we measure health situation or wellness and health of Indian population, it is worse than average. Now the question really is why? And I am a real example of why it is. So just think, on the left side, this is what you might consider a successful person. Company Versata went public in year 2000. What about the person on the right? Just think, who is going to be a happier person? I know on positive side, my name was everywhere, was in Fortune, was able to get invited by Vajpayee ji, all kinds of good things were happening. But inside, I was not a happy person. I really was not a happy person. So what I wanted to talk to you today was not entrepreneurship, not how to make money. In fact, most of my friends who are charter members of TIE, when I meet them, they said, first tell us about your health story, because I really feel that's important. In fact, the next speaker that you'll be hearing from, Raj Shah, he personally took me along with my friends. What they're showing here is next to my house, literally next door to my house, is Mission Peak. From my house, boundary touches. I used to see that, as you are seeing, and I used to feel horrible. Thousands of people come, they go up, I can't. So the day I was able to get up there along with Raj Shah and many other friends, it was absolutely delightful thing. And to be able to do that at a good time, absolutely delightful. So the results of whatever I did, and I will tell you how I did it, were very remarkable. Up to the point I was able to enjoy my life. I was able to play tennis, table tennis. I did my yoga. I went to ICC, India Community Center, that I used to be very much part of. And I was enjoying my life. Things changed. But the important thing is not what you saw. What you saw was just a physical body. More important thing, and Dr. Malti will tell you, other people will tell you, Amit has already told you, it is really in the numbers. So if you look at my numbers, outside appearance, 235 pounds, I only a man who's only 5'4", with 45-inch waist. And one day I could not find any clothes. I had to go to big and tall people's shop. That was shocking. Dr. Malti says you should not even have 25 BMI. I had 41. Body fat was high. Blood sugar was high. So I was definitely diabetic. Fortunately, as Amit pointed out, I had not reached a point where I was taking insulin, but that was next. I had a number of ailments, painful. I had to use sleep apnea machine to go anywhere, couldn't sleep. Other ailments, every day I would have acid reflux, hiatal hernia, name it. I could not, my son would walk with me and say, Daddy, can't you walk a little more? But go to October 12th, 2012, things really changed. So in this time period, my weight came down, my waist came down, hair, clothes, everything improved. BMI reached 25. And doctor said, oh, wonderful. So at 5.5, they declared me non-diabetic. Maybe today they will say, no, you have to bring it down to 5.3 or 5.0, right? My thyroid medication had reduced. My difficulty in terms of urination and so on was reduced quite a bit, almost not there. No sleep aid machine. That was a big thing for me, right? So not use that is a good thing. So overall, I was feeling great, right? That's really happy life. So Som, can we go to the next slide? Now, the question that we should all ask, and Amit said, and you will be hearing from Raj in a very different way, number of different ways can take you there. But one thing I learned was that if you're committed, you'll find a right answer. Entrepreneurs, especially people who live in the valley, if they know what they want to do, and they're committed of doing it, they will find a solution. So big thing really is you have to figure out why do you want to do what you're doing. In my case, one of my friends, Anil Godwani, one of these days told me, Naren, best gift you can give to your children and the family is, can you become a role model for them? That got into my head because I remembered my father never had any of these problems. My uncle never had any of these problems. So clearly it was not genetic in my case. It was all my doing. So then the question really is, how do you change? Now, broadly speaking, I must tell you, there are only 6 to 10 factors, not 25 or 2 million. Clearly, food, as Amit said, plays a very, very important part as far as obesity and diabetes is concerned. Now, clearly, I'm a believer personally, being a Jain also, that best food is organically grown, local, seasonal food. That's the best food you can eat. Can you go back one slide before? So the second thing we must minimize, and my hope is that we can make it zero, minimize any dairy or meat. Minimize. I'm saying because some people may take long time before they can do it, but they should minimize. There may be few supplements that may be necessary, and then physical activity. And last thing is very, very important. It takes time to get there. In the valley, for entrepreneurs, one of the biggest reason for many of these other things to happen is the stress. Sometimes we don't even know that we have stress. I go and talk with somebody. No, I don't have any stress. I'm fine. But there are doctors who will look at them and they say they are stressed. So most easy thing, which by the way, over a period of time, I've been able to do 1 hour of meditation. I've been doing it. Another hour of yoga and pranayama. Wonderful thing. Other simple things which I'm still following are a lot of water, 1 glass of fresh vegetable and fruit juice or smoothie. And last but not the least, guys, is sleep. Early to bed, early to rise has been there in India forever. Next slide, please. So in terms of other couple of things I want to mention is very simple. Fortunately, I was very fortunate to also have a good friend of mine, Dr. Shamdas, who believed that you can do a lot of exercises very quickly through active breathing program. So here's Dr. Shamdas. So there were 2 people that inspired me here in the valley. One is Dr. Shamdas. He used to come to my home from Saratoga to help me. So find anybody that you feel can help you. It doesn't matter whether it's a health coach, it's a friend, but support groups help you a lot. But more important, what you might see here is make your health number one priority. My father told me this, remember this one? The day in the rain, you can tell your wife and your children, I will do anything for you except not hurt my health. Then you have made up your mind. Here's my father and uncle. Here's my teacher who lived till 102. So clearly, if you make health a priority, in India, they call it Pehla Sukh Nirogi Kaya. This means healthy mind and body is what counts. Rest are all other things. The family and friends is the second one, having a right spouse. And the last one is what Amit and I and Raj all have been pushing for. We all need financial resources. So we make that number one. That's the problem. It has to be number three. Just the priority problem, nothing else. Move on. So one important thing I want to also say is, Amit mentioned about yo-yo. You go up and you can come down. You can go up, you can come down. The ultimate thing is that for a long, long period of time, you are able to remain stable. So I went through some ups and downs, but for now, 10 years have passed by, and my numbers that doctors told me should be in this range. They told me, and there was some debate whether it should go down below 145. So they said 145 plus minus 5 is your right weight. If you look at Dr. Malti, your BMI probably is 140. Everything else is fine. So, and the last thing that has happened in last year or so, I've also dropped my thyroid medicine. Hopefully, I won't need that medicine. So coming from such a bad health to be able to keep it, the last point that I scribbled down is a pain point, but there's no answer to it. I'm 77. So clearly we have to accept that our body is aging. You cannot deny that. Your mind may not be, your willingness to be active may not be. So we have to slightly modulate in terms of what push we give to our body. So that is something that I'm still learning. Sometimes I overdo it and then it hurts my back. So that's all I wanted to tell you. You are more than welcome to not only join the CWC and IWC. That is something that has become purpose of my life. Guys, if I can do it, you can do it. That's why Crack the Wellness Code was started. The meaning of Crack the Wellness Code is just that. Crack your own wellness code. So we have started this thing for 3 years ago, and we have taken a opportunity to also start equal program in India under IWC. So please enjoy.
Naren, this was, again, so incredibly inspirational. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about sort of the effect of your life changes on your friends and family, because I know having you share your story has had a profound effect on so many people. And I remember when we had met before you had made these changes, and after we made these changes, it took me like about a couple minutes to even recognize you, because your energy was different, your vivaciousness, your joy, your happiness, everything about you was so elevated. And so I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the impact on your community.
So there are two parts to it. One is what will always happen. That is, if you really, really improve, whether it's Amit, Raj, or me, there is definitely going to be impact over a period of time on your close friends and family. That is given, because you interact with them all the time. They see you what you eat, they see what you do, and so on. So when they look at you, it will definitely have an impact. So every person definitely impacts 100 people at least. The only thing extra that I can take a little bit of credit for, and so can Raj and so can others, is that if you can devote your time, energy in purposefully reaching out. In our case, we are hoping to reach millions of people through CWC. So I'm hoping that a combination of health heroes, many of them that we are discovering, will impact millions. But my impression is at least 100 people will benefit for sure.
When you had made these changes, Naren, you'd made a lot of dietary changes. What was the hardest dietary change for you to make? I'll share, for instance, my parents, the hardest thing for them has been to cut down. We're good Tamilians, and so we have a very rice-based diet. The hardest thing for them was to cut down on the amount of rice that they were eating. And I know everybody else has sort of their own thing that was very difficult. And maybe you could talk a bit about sort of how you approached that decision.
So in my case, one part was easy because we are strict Jains. So the idea of not eating meat and chicken and fish, I mean, that part was easy part. What was difficult was, and that is about upbringing as well, to reduce milk product was hard because philosophically it sometimes doesn't feel right because you see generation. So we don't know what the answer is, but yes, that was hard. The second thing, in my case, beyond that, Dr. Malti, is that I had difficulty in properly sleeping. What that meant was I get excited about doing something. I'm doing something on a computer and I'm reading a book. So it may be 2 o'clock. Next day I sleep at 1 o'clock. So sleep was not in control. So let me give one tip to our audience. So I went and talked with some of my friends. I said, how do I really change this? They gave me a study from Stanford. They said, if you do something, force yourself to do something for 2 to 4 weeks. If you just did it, it becomes a habit. So then I told my friends, I said, come on, I try to sleep, but I don't get a sleep when I want to sleep. They said, do the opposite. No matter what, make sure if you say you will wake up at 6, you just wake up at 6. Whether you got 3 hours sleep, that's fine. So after 2 to 3 weeks, my body learned the lesson. By 9, 10, 10:30, I actually get sleep and then wake up at 5 to 6. So what you have to do, if you want to change your habits, pick one habit at a time and then make sure that you absolutely practice that for 3-4 weeks and make it part of your life.
Thank you so much. And we know that about 3 to 4 weeks is the magic time where people's who've been able to stick with the habit seem to be able to sustain it much longer. So that's, I think, a very important lesson. Thank you so much.
Congrats to Naren. Naren, I still remember our hike to Mission Peak. That was a lovely opportunity. I made congrats on your progress. My slides are not as colorful as yours, but hopefully it'll convey something useful. Okay. Next slide. So I'll spend just a little bit of time about me, my crisis, then and now, and how I did it. Okay. And most importantly, what can you do next? Next. I'm 64. My wife is a teacher and a therapist now. Son is techie like me, and my daughter is a doctor. I've been in and out of startups and large companies. But the most fun project I've had is taking care of maps. My team was responsible for every street in the world, every stop sign, every business name, every speed limit. Well, all that means is if you find something wrong on maps, now we can say we have met the guy we can blame. Currently, I'm Chief Product Officer at an AI company I co-founded. Okay. I hike daily, bike weekly, and go on big hikes annually. I've done EBC, Kilimanjaro, Machu Picchu, etc. Next. So in spite of being pretty active, my diabetes was gradually getting worse. A1C had reached 7.3 last year, down to 6.4 using metformin. And when I went to my cardiologist for a regular checkup, he told me people with diabetes, the risk of a heart attack is as high as someone who already had one heart attack. That was scary for me. My blood pressure was also increasing. I found myself seeing readings of 170 over 110. I went to my primary care and she added 2 more meds. I was already at 3, so now I was at 5. She said, I can't do anything more. So a cardiologist added 2 more, so now up to 7. And actually blood pressure was going even higher. He sent to me a kidney specialist who did an ultrasound and said, I might have to put a stent in your artery. Turned out that wasn't required. But he said, I have 3 more medications to do trial and error with. My sodium was also very low because of some of the meds. So I was getting very scared that I was heading into a major event like a heart attack or a stroke. Fortunately, with God's grace, ran into my friend Lalit, who was running a program called Make My Health. Although this seminar is about diabetes, he told me that my method will work on all chronic diseases. Next slide, please. The results were fantastic. You can see on January 22nd, 2021, I was pretty heavy, 7 blood pressure meds, 3 times minimum diabetes medication. I started on a statin. I have this condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which causes pain in the right jaw, which is often thought of as a TMJ. I took Zyrtec often, and I also took Pepcid often for acid reflux. I still use a CPAP machine, and Naren, I'm hoping to get over that like you. For men, I still enjoy sex, but to enjoy that, I have to take the max dose of Levitra. All right, now go to the next slide. Now, with this program, just in 6 weeks, I was able to get down to 2 meds for my BP. And the numbers were looking pretty good. Diabetes, I stopped all medication. And based on my continuous glucose monitor, I estimated that the A1C was 5.7. But when I did the blood test in April, it was actually 5.5. I stopped statin and my cholesterol is in normal range. My trigeminal neuralgia, I was able to taper my meds down. The pain is mostly gone. Once in a while it's back. I've not taken Zyrtec. I've not taken Pepcid. Sleep apnea, I'll go for a sleep test soon. And my ED is also resolved. I'm super thrilled. So can you go to the next slide, please? I think you can also take charge of your health at any age. To do that, next slide, please. Join my support group. And the purpose of this group being maintain and improve motivation to continue on the program you are on or join a program like mine. Okay. I already have one group. Members interact and share and learn from each other. Although the group I'm starting will focus on diabetes, but it will help you with all your chronic diseases. We'll meet every 2 weeks on Zoom, start on June 23rd. We'll take the first 25, 11 is already signed up. Now you'll probably ask, so what did I do? Can you go to the next slide, please? The first thing I did was stopped all animal protein. I was already a vegan, vegetarian, but this means I become a vegan. But by the way, you can have a very bad vegan diet. Potato chips are actually totally vegan. But for me, I didn't stop milk. I just replaced cow milk with other forms of milk. Soy milk for chai, coconut yogurt, and no ghee. I give body organs more rest, which was by limiting my eating window to 8 hours. Okay. For me, 8:30 to 4:30 works best. Okay, also called intermittent fasting. Now, I learned that you eat because your hunger hormone peaks at different times of the day. And just in 2 weeks, my hunger hormone was tamed. I'm no longer hungry after 5. But the more difficult part was not based on hunger. It's based on cravings. For me, the craving was munching while watching TV. So if I watch late night shows, I felt like munching. So I actually stopped watching late night TV completely. And now that I have the discipline, I can actually watch it. Next slide, please. I also reduced all processed foods. Now, foods come in various degrees of processing. Oil is the worst. So I'm at 0 or very little oil. At home, 0. When I go out, I allow little oil. I increase consumption of fruits. And at 1% of body weight, which was recommended, it's equivalent to 5 apples. But I do an apple, a banana, a few strawberries, etc. I've increased consumption of vegetables dramatically. And the only way to do that is to do a lot of green juicing in addition to eating. And I'm improving my sleep. Next slide, please. Benefits are, in addition to what I showed, I'm looking 10 years younger and feeling 15. Energy level is fantastic. Every Saturday, I do a 90-minute hike, and now a 25-mile bike ride. Next. That's it. Thank you.
Raj, again, this is so inspirational, and really thank you for sharing your story. You know, I was really struck again by not only that you have made these changes, and for you, the intermittent fasting limiting to an 8-hour window, much like Amit, was very important. But you also have sort of formed community partnerships and outreaches with a support group. So have you started your support groups yet? I know you've done some in the past, and was hoping to see sort of what people get when they join a support group and what it really means in terms of reinforcement. Because I know it's hard to do it alone.
So I already have one support group running. We meet weekly, and it's the members are reporting that they need it. It helps them keep motivated, and will often say, hey, tomorrow I'm doing a juice fast. And others say, okay, I'll join you. And then we'll sync up with each other during the day. So I did a 1.5 day water only fast 2 days ago, and 3 other were with me that day.
It's great. And can you again, maybe,
And also one more thing. See, this group has been people who have been part of Lalit's Make My Health program, and he has given us a lot of information. So we often find ourselves revisiting and deepening our understanding of the principles. See, for me, it's very difficult to do something just because someone tells me. I have to understand why. Okay, I used to do intermittent fasting for calorie control. Now I do it to keep my organs rest. Okay, so big difference for me.
and can you talk a little bit also about sort of how you gave up some of the things so one of the things that people often tell me is when I talk to them about, oh, you should try to adopt a lifestyle that's going to control your diabetes, they say, I really can't give up this. And that particular thing is sort of the millstone around their neck, so to speak. So how did you decide, because there must have been some things that you really enjoyed that you just had to say no to. And I know you were very driven by the overall motivation to make changes. How did you make the small little changes along the way? Because sometimes
So
those little are as difficult as the big things.
Yeah, so I have, no, it's a very good question. In fact, I'm advising my niece who has 2 young kids. I'm saying, give them healthy habits now. And she said, oh, how do I take away milk from them? Okay. I said, no, you're not taking away milk. You're substituting. So I've changed my language. I'm not taking anything away. I'm substituting from something not so good to something better.
And
As a
so,
kid, I used to love playing marbles until I found something better.
That's very helpful. And I think the issues around milk are a little bit complex. I think that the overall theme that we generally talk about with diabetes control, this was a question that was put in the chat, is both total carbohydrate control in terms of the total amount of carbohydrates that you're taking, and also what's called the glycemic index, which is the bioavailability of the sugar. So is that carbohydrate more easy to digest or less easy to digest? And certainly, lactose, which is broken down into glucose, is fairly easy to digest for most of us. And many people, though, are lactose intolerant. And so they actually find that their allergies and a lot of other things get better when they stop milk and milk products, especially things that are not yogurt, which is a fermented milk product that tends to be both a little bit bioavailable, but also has a fairly good protein count. So I think that's one of the dilemmas that many people who are vegetarian have, is that when you're vegetarian, what are your protein sources? And most of the plants and vegetables have protein, but that's a thing that I think that you can work out with your dietitian. And there's a lot of groups that are coming out now with ideal diets. So that I think that's an important idea, but the idea of substitution and the language you use around that and how you talk to people about those changes, I think is just brilliant. And thank you so much, Raj. Naren, you had your hand up?
Yes. So Raj, one question going forward, and
Yep.
I want you to think through, all of us meet our friends most of the times in the evening.
Yep.
And one essential part of that meeting is dinner.
Yep.
And same thing is true to some degree also of our children. Children and other kids, right? And when they meet, the question is, how do you not join them in eating? Because it feels in our society, if you are not eating with them, you're being rude about it. So what do you do?
So, well, we haven't socialized that much because of the pandemic.
There's something
But
going.
But when we get back,
started, yeah, we started. I've started socializing, and fortunately, many of my friends are joining this program. Okay, but what I intend to do, and I already have done it for a few times, is I'll actually finish my meal at 4:30. Okay, I'll go there and I'll eat a little bit. I'll call that my cheat day. Okay, and I'll taste most things. I'm very strict about animal protein, so being vegan. I will cheat on oil. Okay, a little bit. So I will participate with them. I mean, my plate will be there with food. No one has to know how much I'm taking.
Very good answer, Raj. You don't want to make others feel that you are not participating with them, but that will make
Exactly. And even with my wife, when I started this program, I told her, I don't want to put any pressure on you. I'll manage it myself.
yes.
Okay. But she happened to also join. So same thing with friends. When I go someplace, I don't want to burden them extra.
Hmm.
I'll just manage.
And another thing, so Raj, I think that's so important. Another thing that I've seen people do, and sometimes what I'll do too, is I'll bring food for everyone. I'll bring the salad that I want to eat, or I'll bring something else that's really tasty for everyone. I'll bring a dessert that I know is very healthy. So I'm not only contributing to the party or the event, but also making sure that there's something there for me. And I might even bring a snack that I know is going to be particularly healthy and kind of eat it on the side.
Yeah,
Because I want
exactly.
socialization, and then I think moderating those portions. If you decide that you're going to have something that's not something that you would normally eat, and keeping that maybe to 1 day a week is very reasonable. Because again, this is a cumulative effect over time. You don't have to be perfect all the time, but you have to be really good about your diet most of the time. And then on those days, you can also exercise a little bit more. You can take a walk with everybody after dinner. You can arrange other activities that bring that blood sugar down. You know that the peak of the blood sugar is going to happen half an hour to an hour after you eat, and it's going to be sustained for the next hour or two. So if you can get people to take a group walk or do a small activity, that'll
Exactly.
all.
That's what I do.
Harita asks a very good question, which is a lot, our health heroes had major shocks to their system, so to speak, when they found out that health was completely out of control. How about if it's just a little bit out of control and it's not quite where you want to be? And what I would recommend is start small and start simple. Take a look at your life, take a look at your goals. What kind of a life do you want to live? How do you want to be vibrant? How do you want to be, positively contagious in your joy? What type of activities do you want to embrace that you haven't done yet? What are you curious about? What do you want to try? And then take a look at your day-to-day activities and say, are there small changes I can make? Can I get a sit-stand desk instead of just a regular desk? Can I get something that is an under-desk exerciser if I have to sit for long periods of time? Can I take a break and just do some stretching? When I look at my foods, can I substitute one food for another? Is there something else that I'm curious about that I haven't tried? Who else can I get to help me? Who else lives at home with me? Who's doing the cooking? So I would recommend starting anywhere, and then and seeing how it goes, and then using, as Amit had done, some outcomes that you can kind of track along the way, whether it's blood sugar, or if it's how you're feeling, or your heart rate, or your blood pressure, or your blood sugar, whatever that might be, just to kind of get yourself started. The key is not that you have to get to a particular point, although we'd like everyone to do it. The key is to start on the journey. So I hope that helps.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Sure.
So I'm almost normal, except for I have one medication remaining for blood pressure. Okay. Even if once I'm done with that, I look at continuing this to be protective of health, meaning make my body stronger against potential cancer, potential other diseases that are not showing up yet, but maybe brewing inside my body. Be stronger against fighting with COVID. And what I've learned from the PWF Masters is that what I'm doing will make me stronger.
And if I can elaborate on that, these type of dietary changes affect your entire metabolism. They affect your blood pressure, your heart rate, your cholesterol levels. The exercise will drive up your good cholesterol, drive down your bad cholesterol. Your triglycerides will come down. You will feel differently. You can arrest early diabetic retinopathy and reverse it. If there's been no structural damage, you can halt it. Erectile dysfunction. So we don't talk, sex is a very taboo topic in most cultures and societies, but sex gets better because the microvasculature of the body is normalized and somewhat restored. Again, if there's no permanent damage. once that neuropathy happens, you can stabilize it so it doesn't get worse. So these are massive changes. And then, as you were saying, Raj was saying, for cancer prevention and other things, people who are doing these things are also typically going in for standard health checkups. So they're doing the preventive maintenance to be able to catch the cancers, and partnering with your doctor to be able to make sure you're doing all age appropriate and risk factor appropriate screening is really important. So doing one and the other together is a very potent combination. And I'm sure Naren and Amit also have.
By the way, since you did bring up the taboo subject, I'll say what I've learned is that these things not only help men, they also help women in their
They-
sexual experience.
Yes.
Okay.
Along with pelvic floor exercises and other types of things that improve
Right.
people's enjoyment of sex.
Yep.
So Raj, thank you very much to start this wonderful support group. I'm hoping that many support groups will form by different, so you will be a role model in trying to get these going. And they can be many different kinds. Seniors could create a support group for themselves. So many different ways we can create these support groups.
I just want to thank our health heroes, Amit, Naren, and Raj. I'm sorry, Amit, Naren and Raj, and Som also for putting this together along with Soumya. The Crack the Wellness Code movement to be able to improve the health and longevity and vitality of the South Asian community is so important. You've had hundreds of programs that now are reaching people all across the country. And I think together it's going to catalyze a movement within our community for us to be able to embrace our best selves and embrace health. So I'm very grateful that you asked us all to come here today. And I want to thank all the audience members and participants for their great questions and their vigorous interest in this topic.
Thanks, Dr. Malti. It was a delight having you. And of course, we would like to see more of you in our event sessions and programs. And we'll keep you posted as to how our support group and our health hero is going.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. So having said that, enjoy your weekend. And we will be in touch with you. We'll look at the survey and see how you responded, and we'll get in touch with you. Yeah, Amit is on the, any last quick comments, Amit? It's an amazing story.
Thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you, Dr. Srinivasan, as well as my other health heroes. This was very informative and super exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.